All right, here's a few more examples for this first section of the text. I'm hoping this helps. Let me know if it's not very helpful or if it is helpful, either way. All right, so we're looking at the numbers from 1 to 62. We're going to look for the sum of all of those numbers. So again, we're looking at this string all the way to 62. And a method of figuring that out is to kind of combine them and make some pairs. And we'll notice that each end pair creates a sum of 63 in this situation. So step one is to just find that sum of the pairs, which we already did. We're looking on each end. 62 and 1 make 63. 2 and 61 make 63. 60 and 3 make 63. So we know the sum of each pair of numbers is 63. Okay. Step two. Find out how many numbers are from 1 to 62. So the best thing to do here is to just try a simpler method. Just try a smaller number of numbers in order for you to figure this out. So just think of the numbers 1 through 5. Well, we can easily count that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we know there's 5 numbers through there. So mathematically, how could we figure that out? Well, if I take 5, take away 0, 0 is 1 less than 1. So if I take 5 minus 0, 1 less than 1, I get 5. Okay. Another way to think about that, which is one of the methods that was shown in the other video, is you take 5 minus 1, your endpoints, and then you add back the 1. Okay. Because you're actually finding the distance between those, and so you're not really counting that first value. So we have to add it back on. So you end up with 5. So a couple of different ways to look at that. And in this case, it's not that hard to see that there's 62. 62 minus 0 is one way we could do that to get 62. Or 62 minus 1 is 61, and add back that 1 to get to 62. Okay, and it's pretty easy to see that in this situation, but there's going to be other situations later on that make it a little bit more difficult to see. So next up, we can use pairs. We're using pairs to get the sum of 63. So that means we don't actually have 62 sums. We have 62 numbers total, but then remember we're pairing them up. So we actually have to take that amount that we have, the amount of numbers that we have, which is 62, and we have to cut that in half because we're pairing them up. We're using 2 at a time. So we actually only have 31 total sums. So if we go back up here, because we're combining 1 and 62, that's one set. And then the next set. So the total number of numbers that we have in this is getting cut in half because we're pairing them up. All right, so we have 31 sums. All right. Step 4 is to now find the total sum. Okay. And to do that, we're going to use multiplication because that's a shortcut for addition. We have 31 sets of 63. So we could add 63 plus 63 plus 63 31 times, or we can use the shortcut, which is multiplication, and find that 63 times 31 is 1,953. All right. So the main thing in this, I don't love doing this step 1, step 2, step 3, because it makes it seem like I want you to memorize some steps. That's not the case here at all. What I want you to do is understand the steps. If you're just memorizing the steps and just going to recreate it with another problem and you're not really understanding where that comes from, this is not going to be helpful. Remember, eventually you're going to have to explain this to some kids. And these kids might be scared of math, or they may hate math, or they may get confused by math really easily. And you need to have a good, deep understanding of this, of these, all these skills that we're going to be talking about this semester in order to end up explaining it to a kid who may really dislike math or be afraid of it. So just keep that in the back of your mind every time you're doing a problem like this. And you're not really understanding it, or you just find yourself memorizing the steps and not really understanding it. Take a step back and either ask me some more questions or rewatch to see if it's more helpful. All right, there is a second method to this. Maybe this one will make more sense to you. So what we could do is we could double this string of numbers, 1 through 62, and just add the pairs this way. Step 1 is still the same. Our sum of these pairs is still 63, okay? So now we have to figure out how many pairs there are, which we did already. It's the same exact step that we took in step 2 in the previous. So there's 62 pairs, okay? Now we're going to multiply those two pairs, or those two numbers together. We've got 62 pairs of numbers times the sum of those pairs, which is 63, which gives us 3,906. Now, there's a step 4. This is where we would have to now divide this by 2. So we did some dividing by 2 in the other example, but in a different step to cut our number of pairs in half. This is just done in a different order, and we're thinking about it just a titch differently, okay? But we're still getting to the same solution, okay? So we take the sum of all of these pairs, which was 3,906, and now we're going to cut it in half because we only want the sum of this first string of numbers. And this 3,000 is actually the sum of all of them, the doubled string. So if we divide it by 2, we get that same answer, right? So I'm not sure which of those methods is easier for you. And if you want to fast forward through one of them and ignore the other, that is totally fine. All right. Now, things, of course, have to get a little bit more complicated. Now, in this string of numbers, notice there's a big difference here. First of all, we're not starting at 1. We're starting at 9. And we're not counting consecutive numbers here. We're looking at every third number. So that's going to cause some differences, okay? And I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. There's some differences. And how are our steps different? Because of the differences in our string of number. Step 1 is still going to be the same. We're going to find the sum of the pairs. We're going to pair them up. 9 and 60 are 69. And of course, I have taught middle school math forever. So of course, I'm thinking, why did I pick this? I would not pick this for an 8th grade math class at all because I wouldn't be able to get past the laughter happening. Anyway, so we've got these pairs add up to be 69. The second step is to find how many numbers are from 9 to 60. And we're not even thinking about the fact that they're every third number yet. We're just going to figure out how many numbers from 9 to 60. So again, remember the two methods we looked at for figuring that out. It's not quite as intuitive. So we have to think about, okay, when there was the numbers 1 through 5, there was a couple of different ways we could do this. Well, let's do the same thing. Let's replicate it. We have our largest number, which is 60. And now this time, instead of subtracting 0, like I did with the other, I'm subtracting 8. And that's because that is 1 less than my end number here, or my beginning number in my list of numbers or my sequence. So 1 less than that is 8. So that's why I'm going to subtract 8. And I find out that there's 72 numbers between 9 and 60. Okay, remember, we're not thinking about the fact that there's every third number yet. We can do that soon here. Or we could just do the two end numbers, 60 minus 9, find the difference in them, and then add one of those back, okay, to get 72 numbers in the set, okay? Now, here's where we start thinking about, okay, we use pairs to get the sum of 69, and that means we don't have 72 sums. We actually have half that amount because we're pairing it, okay? And this is where it starts getting a little tricky. And on top of that, only every third number is being used. Okay, so let's think about that again. So in this string, I am pairing the numbers up. So yes, there's 72 numbers between 9 and 60, but I'm pairing them up, okay, which is the first thing. And then on top of that, it's only every third number. It's not consecutive numbers, one right after another, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so how do we deal with that? So The first thing we're going to do, and actually you can do this in any order you really want to, is we're going to take 72 and divide it by 2. So we're going to cut it in half, remembering that we're pairing them up. So that's why we're dividing by 2, because we're thinking about those pairs. And we get 36. So that means there's that many pairs between 9 and 60. Okay? But now it's only using every third number. So that's why we have to divide it by 3 as well. And we get 12 total sums. Now, the last thing we do is we take the number of sums that we're going to have and multiply it by the sum, because yes, we've got the number 69 being added 12 times. So we could add that 12 times, or we could do the faster method, which is multiplication, and we get 828. So again, that makes it a little more tricky because there's a lot more to think about. All right, we can look at this kind of similar to the method 2. And again, if you want to fast forward through this one, if the other one made more sense to you, that's fine. Okay. So this is like method 2 with the first example where we double it. We double the string of numbers that we've got. Step 1 is still the same. The sum of the pairs is 69. We're adding those pairs. And then we're going to find out how many pairs there are. Okay. And this is that tricky part. All right, at first it's pretty easy. We just do 60, take away 8, which is 72, or 60, take away 9, and add that one back to find 72. And we found that in that other example. So there's 72 numbers between 9 and 60. Now remember, these are not consecutive numbers. Because of that, we now need to divide that number by 3. Okay, so we had 72 numbers between 9 and 60, but we're not counting, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We're counting every third number. And because we're counting every third number, we divide by 3 to find that there's actually only 24 numbers between 9 and 60. All right, and now all we need to do is take our number of pairs, which is 24, and multiply it by the sum, which is 69. All right. Now, step 4, you're thinking, okay, that number doesn't seem right. Well, that's because it's not. We're not quite there yet. There's a step 4. And this step 4, if you remember, we go back up here, remember we doubled this string of numbers. So if we left this string of numbers doubled, we'd have 1,656. But now we have to cut that in half to find just the string of numbers 9 through 60. And that's how we get that 828, which is exactly the same thing we got in the prior one. Hoping this helps. Please, again, let me know one way or the other. If it's not helpful, it's good for me to know that as well. Or if it is really helpful, so I share it with others as well.